Alrighty. In the interest of time, I'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everybody for being here today. We're so excited to host this webinar featuring two passionate advocates for organic farming, Brise Tencer, Executive Director, and Thelma Velez, Research and Education Director of the Organic Farming Research Foundation. At Iroquois Valley, our farmers adhere to the USDA National Organic Program Standards, and we're proud to showcase and support the newly released Organic is Regenerative Toolkit produced by our friends at OFRF. Today's webinar will highlight accessible tools from this toolkit, showcasing the benefits of organic certification and explaining why organic farming is the original climate-smart agriculture. During the presentation, we encourage you to submit your questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and Brise and Thelma will address your questions during the dedicated Q&A session at the end of their presentation. The webinar will be recorded and it will be available on our website in the coming days, so thank you for being here and for your support. And before I pass it over to Brise and Thelma, we do have a few quick updates from the Investor Relations team that we'd love to share with you. The first one being that this summer we will be transitioning to a new investor portal. This transition marks a really significant step towards enhancing our investor admin processes and providing you with a more streamlined and efficient experience. And we're really committed to making this a smooth transition for you all. So we will be hosting a portal transition webinar and will be available for additional one-on-one support. Lastly, with the guidance of our new VP of Marketing and Communications, Nora Chauvinik, our team is embarking on an exciting new plan to share more information about the work and impact of the farmers and ranchers in our portfolio. And we can't do this without your insights, so please take a few minutes to complete our brief 15-minute investor survey. Your feedback will help us provide the most relevant and valuable information about the impacts of your investment for our farmers and ranchers. We've already had over 130 investors complete the survey, which is far more than we expected. So if you are one of those investors, thank you so much for taking the time. And if you are not one of those investors, it's not too late. I'm going to drop the link to the survey in the chat, and we'd really greatly appreciate your feedback. Now I'm so excited to hand it over to Brise and Thelma for their presentation on OFRF's Organic is Regenerative Toolkit.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I'm really excited to be here with all of you today to talk about the alignment between organic and regenerative and introduce some of the messaging tools that our organization has designed to help partners such as yourselves to talk about these two. So production. As Nicole mentioned, I'm Brise Tencer, the ED of the Organic Farming Research Foundation, and I've been working at the intersection of environmental issues and agriculture for around 25 years. And I'm super honored to be here today with my friend and colleague, Thelma Velez, who is the Research and Education Director here for OFRF. Our organization, the Organic Farming Research Foundation, is a national nonprofit organization, so fully charitable 501c3 dedicated to fostering the improvement and the widespread adoption of organic farming systems. And we believe that organic farming supports healthy and resilient people, ecosystems, and economies. We work in three main areas to advance regenerative organic farming. We work through research, advancing on-farm research to solve organic production challenges, through grower education and getting research results back into the hands of growers so they can utilize and implement that knowledge, and advocacy at the federal level, which for us is really about making sure organic producers have access to a fair share of federal funding and access to programs, including those at the Department of Agriculture in research, education, extension, conservation programs, crop insurance, and more. Just going to highlight for a moment our research, which really is the backbone of what we do. And I think there's a couple of things that are unique about our research programs. The first is that we really take our lead from farmers. We survey them regularly to understand what are their needs and challenges, and then we invest in partnership with our community, funders, partners, collaborators in small grants to help find on-farm solutions to those production challenges. We've got a whole bunch of exciting projects to share related to how we then disseminate those findings through partners, webinars, an online research hub, events, and more. But please take a look at our website. We have a ton of resources, a lot more to come, and they're all free, downloadable, and here for our community of farmers and others to utilize. While the OFR team, our staff, are small, we are a national organization and take a lot of pride in being effective at advancing regenerative organic research. These are just a few of our highlights from 2003, where you can see some metrics that we think are really making a big impact in terms of getting information about organic farming to a broad array of our community across the US, North America, and to some extent across the globe. The term regenerative has gained widespread adoption in recent years. I'm sure all of you in attendance today are very familiar with it. And still, the term is often used to mean really different things by different people. And this kind of different types of uses of what regenerative mean does cause some confusion. And so what we want to highlight today is the ways in which organic farmers have really been using regenerative organic practices since before either term was coined. Organic has evolved over the years, and now, thanks to the 1990 Organic Food Production Act and the ensuing standards and legislation, now has a very clear standard with rigorous oversight and enforcement backed by the Organic Foods Production Act and the USDA's National Organic Program. So our toolkit that we're going to start walking through in just a moment here is really meant to offer a wide range of messaging tools, such as social media, slide decks, handouts, and others, to provide really some resources for our community about what organic agriculture is. I will say that while we try to put together a really broad array of resources for our allies in this, because we want to have more alignment on how people talk about organic. So we have a really robust database of where we pulled these talking points from. We point to where we got citations and backing evidence. But these 3 resources on our website were 3 of the resources we use the most often. And for those of you who want to go back and look at our source data, these are great publications, and we're happy to help get any of these to you. One of them is by our organization, and the others are by other partners. So just to sort of really orient, the term organic and regenerative have a lot of goals in common. Organic, farming have been really using some of these practices for so many years, but organic has a lot built into the way it's structured to really support biodiversity, carbon sequestration, clean water, clean air, safe environments for farmers and farm workers, and so much more. And I apologize, I'm just having a little delay clicking through. And just sort of to give a synopsis of how we organized our tool deck, we did organize it in terms of 3 major kind of buckets of information and talking points. The one is on how organic supports a resilient planet, and you can see under those some of the categories in which we've developed messages and backup citations. The second category is how organic builds healthy communities, the economy, farm workers, people, and animals. And the last is on trustworthy, how the certification and the standard works, and how we can see its evolution and enforcement. For today, we're going to mostly talk about that first bucket of the ways in which organic is climate friendly, healthy for soils, protective of biodiversity, and systems focused. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to our research director to dive into the content of these messages. So thank you, Thelma.
Yeah, thank you, Brise. And I'm excited to be here today. And as Brise was mentioning, we've just heard the call for just more clarification on what are the differences and or similarities between organic and regenerative. And we really see that there are many similar goals, especially with respect to, soil, ecosystems, and communities. So Brise, if you can go to the next slide, please. One of the big differences that I will point out is that USDA organic is legally defined and enforceable standard. But if you look at the USDA definition and iPhone definition, there are some slight differences, but a lot of overlap, right? The focus is on integrating cultural, biological, mechanical practices, fostering cycling of resources, promoting, biodiversity or ecological balance. I will say that iPhone does also include promoting fair relationships and good quality of life for all involved. But in the USDA National Organic Program standards, there's an emphasis on soil fertility, managing crop nutrients in a way that is sustainable, such as cover cropping or crop rotations. Next slide, please. And at the moment, regenerative does not have a legally binding definition, and it's caused a little bit of confusion because people may use the term to mean just strictly no-till. They may still allow application of herbicides, or maybe they mean integrating livestock. So with the rise of regenerative, as many of you can imagine, there's a call for consensus. What does this actually mean? The Natural Resource Defense Council actually produced a scientific literature review looking at over 200 peer-reviewed journal articles. And in these articles, they were looking for the common thread. What are the top 5 practices and the top 5 desired outcomes that they found across all of these articles when people use the term regenerative agriculture? And those are, for the practices, reducing tillage, integrating livestock, using cover crops, using crop rotations, and low to no external inputs. And of course, the goal is to increase soil health and fertility, sequester more carbon, increase biodiversity, improve water health, and of course, improving soil and economic well-being of communities. Next slide, please. So I find that interesting because OFRF actually does a survey roughly every 5 to 6 years, and we ask certified organic growers from across the country about their biggest challenges. Our 2022 National Organic Research Agenda, NOR report, which will be linked in the chat, we did have over 1,000 responses, and we asked them, what are your challenges? What are your needs? But we also asked them, what are your practices? What are you currently doing on your farm? And we asked both organic and transitioning farmers, and they are leaders in those same soil and climate health stewardship practices that fall under regenerative. So 88% of organic farmers that responded to our survey are cover cropping, and 86 are using crop rotations. And if you look at crop rotations, not just sometimes, over 3/4 are using it not just sometimes, but often and very often. So we just want to make sure that it's clear that organic growers are already implementing these practices that fall under the regenerative definition, definition. Next slide, please.
Oops.
I believe that's it. Yeah, so this is actually one of the sample slides from our toolkit. So there is a presentation slide deck, a PowerPoint slide deck that you can use to share widely. But one of those main points, as Bruce mentioned, is organic is healthy for soils. We recognize that we can increase water retention capacity. It does store carbon, and it helps build resilience to climatic changes, whether those are extreme weather conditions that are fluctuating or things such as drought. Next slide, please. But I would be remiss not to mention the elephant in the room that people are sometimes concerned about, and that is tillage in organic. There is a concern that people say, well, organic growers till, and that can break up soil aggregates, or that can lead to more soil erosion. And there's actually a lot of interesting science that has come up regarding tillage recently. And so one production challenge cited by organic farmers, and they are not allowed to use synthetic herbicides. So in the case of some regenerative practices, they may not till, but they'll kill weeds using herbicides. Organic growers cannot do that. But the good news is that research has shown that judicious and shallow cultivation or tillage does not negatively impact the soil profile to the same extent that conventional deeper tillage does. And it actually benefits soil microbial biomass. Next slide, please. So there are many different studies, and they are all included in the toolkit. If you go into the spreadsheet that's part of the toolkit, we have all of our citations and links in there. But shallow tillage has less negative impact on soil life and soil health than deeper tillage does. And when you stack shallow tillage with organic practices like cover cropping, it actually enhances soil organic matter. Reduced tillage can enhance soil microbial biomass, and that's respecting to fungal and bacterial biomass, which is really critical for soil organic carbon over time. And it does that more effectively than continuous no-till. So there was a meta-analysis in 2022, and they looked at conventional tillage, which is deeper tillage, usually moldboard plowing, depths of 12 inches. They compared that to reduced tillage, non-inversion tillage. These are a light disking rototiller, and usually less than a depth of no more than 6 inches. And then they compared that to no-till, which is a lot of times what people refer to as regenerative. And their findings were fascinating because the reduced tillage systems actually supported double the microbial biomass than conventional tillage systems, which wasn't that fascinating, but it was interesting to see that the strict no-till only increased it by 25%, right? Whereas the reduced till increased it more. So next slide, please. This ties very much into that statement that organic is climate friendly, right? It helps reduce greenhouse gas emissions, it stores carbon, and it will build climate resilience over time. Next slide. So soil health and tillage and carbon sequestration, what do I have to share for that? There's a lot of text here, and I apologize, but if you could just focus on the pretty picture in the middle, you'll see that the roots go much deeper than the height of a plant above ground. And this is very common, and it's important to recognize that because most of the microbial biological activity is happening in the root zone, right? That is where we're seeing that carbon sequestration happening. Meta-analysis showed that on average, 19% higher total soil organic carbon was stored in organic versus conventional systems. And a lot of these differences were just looking at microbial biomass and enzymatic activity. And then when we think about tillage, right, tillage occurring at depths above 6 inches is not really significantly impacting the stable carbon in the soil. So more than half of organic stable carbon is stored through mineral-associated organic carbon, and that happens in the root process, in the root zone, through root exudation. And so if we're not tilling at these depths below 12 inches, then we're not really impacting those soil carbon stocks. SOC, the acronym is for soil organic carbon. Next slide, please. This is interesting because the U.S. Department of Agriculture has agricultural research stations, and that's what USDA ARS stands for. And in 6 ARS long-term farming systems trials, they looked at organic systems and they compared them to conventional rotations. And they found that these organic systems accrued roughly 400 to 600 pounds per acre more of soil organic carbon. In the Beltsville, Maryland trial in particular, they compared it to conventional no-till and conventional tilled. So conventional no-till could essentially be similar to what regenerative might be if they're not using those stacked practices. So in the no-till, that was conventional, the organic system accrued 380 pounds more soil organic carbon per year. And when compared to the tilled, it was 600 pounds more. Next slide. And I'll talk a little bit more about the practices, right? So the factors that the researchers say is, these are synergistic relationships that are occurring. It's not just the reduction of tillage and the depth, but it's also that stacking. So using cover crops, using organic amendments, diversifying those rotations are contributing to all of these stocks of soil organic carbon, perennial sod phase. So those deep roots, again, back to the microorganisms that are in the soil that are storing that carbon. And so collectively, all of these practices that organic growers are frequently using help sequester more carbon. Next slide. And then the last one that I just wanted to touch on from our deck is organic is protective of biodiversity. And I find this one to be really important because we think about biodiversity a lot of times about just above ground biodiversity, plants and animal communities, our bees, but it's also below ground biodiversity that is really important for these systems. Next slide, please. And so the benefits of organic management for biodiversity are clear. There's a very positive relationship. Above ground biodiversity, again, it's those plants and animals above ground. So bees benefit the most from organic management. We care about our pollinators. We want to make sure that they have healthy lives. But other arthropods and birds benefit. So much of the research on above ground biodiversity in organic systems compared to conventional looks at birds and arthropods, and they look at two things. One is species abundance, which is how many, right? How many of a particular species there are across different taxa. And the other is species richness. So how many different types of species do you see in those systems? And those increases in abundance are 30 to 50% in organic systems. And for species richness, it's anywhere between 1 and 34%. These are a little bit difficult to quantify. But the below ground biodiversity is where we really see big differences. And this is because in organic systems, they're not using pesticides, herbicides, things that harm the soil microbiota. And so another meta-analysis, they showed 32 to 84% greater microbial biomass carbon and microbial biomass nitrogen in conventional systems. And that is because of the diversity of microorganisms that are in the soil. So I'm gonna just transition and just redirect back to our Organic as Regenerative Toolkit. We did create this toolkit because we had growers and partner organizations and people just saying, you know, there's this huge interest in regenerative, but we've been doing these same practices for so long. How can we make sure we explain that to either our clients or our customers or other advocates? And so within our toolkit, we have our intro memo, we have a flyer, we do have the deck, there's a social media kit that shows you how to use it. And of course, for me, the most important is the message mapping, which is where you can find all of the citations that back up these claims. Next slide. So moving forward, I really just wanted to close with, you know, this call to action. We just want you to share this, you know, amplify the message that organic is regenerative, share the toolkit, share it with others who you think might benefit from it. We've shared it with farmers who have been sharing it with their customers as well. If you're interested in collaborating and sharing these or more success stories, potentially hosting other workshops, collaborating with us, please feel free to reach out to us. And then support the work that we do because we're just doing it to help organic farmers, right? And that is our main goal. So as much as you can support us, we'll continue to amplify that work and support other organic growers. Next slide. And with that, I will transfer the talking power back to our Iroquois Valley farmland partners. Thank you so much for listening to our presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to direct them to Brise or myself, and you can access all of our links. We can put those when we share the slide deck out.
All righty. Thanks so much, Brise and Thelma. That was awesome. Let's see, we're getting some more questions coming in. A lot of people are curious what OFR's relationship is with Rodale Institute and or the Regenerative Organic Alliance, and how are you different from those organizations?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. There's just a huge amount of work to do in the organic community and our goal in advancing organic agriculture. So we work with as many partners as we can, including both of the organizations mentioned. We are a little bit different in that we're not doing research ourselves, but rather we work as sort of a convener of funds and sort of run a pass-through grant-making program to address those on-farm challenges. So we're re-granting money out to projects, small projects across the country and across North America. We do have some in Canada and Mexico. Most of our projects are across the US. So that's different. And I think the other thing that Thelma and I both touched on our introductory talks that we do that is really unique is that survey of organic farmers. So when we run those surveys and focus groups and listening sessions around the country to say, what are your challenges? We share that back to partners like Rodale and others, but also to universities, the Department of Agriculture, members of Congress, say, you know, we know that organic is regenerative and we can keep advancing those regenerative and climate benefit properties of organic farming by continuing to invest in the research. So you know, there's a little bit of a nuance around the way we work, but we're really grateful for the many other important partners in the space who are working to tackle these very big, complex problems in really complementary ways to us.
Thanks, Brise. A related question, can you speak to your relationship to the Real Organic Project standards?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, you know, the Real Organic Project, which has taken on standards that are organic plus, I guess I would say, focusing on, you know, additional aspects. We think that's great to keep improving. And I think we're organizationally aligned in that, we support continuous improvement of organic farming and organic farming systems. Our mission statement is interesting as an organization because we work both to foster the improvement as well as the widespread adoption. So our work currently supports all land being moved towards organic. We believe that organic as it is still a very small and niche part of US agricultural production, still only close to 1%. So we want to help overall more land, more farmers, more acres come into organic production. And we also support efforts to take those who are already doing organic and help them become the very best they can be.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would say I actually was at a conference just a couple of months ago, and I had someone from Real Organic Project come out and specifically reference this deck. And they said, wait a minute, you were the ones who released the organic is regenerative slide deck. Oh, it's so great to just have this resource. And we've been sharing it. And we've seen certified organic growers who are also Real Organic Project certified also sharing out the resources from this slide deck.
I guess last thing on that, I think one thing that we, Real Organic Project, and many of other partners hold as a shared value around soil health is the foundation of really the climate benefits of organic farming, which we're working to advance. So, our organization isn't working specifically on hydroponic or other systems, which is certainly like a key challenge for them, but we still believe that the biodiversity, climate benefits, carbon sequestration, et cetera, the real opportunity is in advancing soil-based systems. So we put most of our organizational effort there. And I think that's an area of significant overlap in our values.
This is a really good question. Another word that I hear more and more frequently is agroecology. Can you speak to how that word relates to organic and regenerative? What is similar or what is different?
Would you like me to take this one, Brise?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, agroecology is actually a term that can mean many different things. From a practice perspective, agroecology is that, using the practices that help integrate your agricultural system and embed it within the natural ecosystem and environment around it in a sustainable way. But agroecology also has a scientific component, or is a science and the study of those different mechanisms that help build sustainability. And then something that's slightly different is that agroecology is also a socio-political movement. And this originated with La Via Campesina, which is a landless peasant movement that originated back in the 90s. And so agroecology is now also kind of being used in different institutional settings to just mean the practice or the science, but there are deeper roots to that term. And so organic systems that are embedded within their natural ecology can be considered agroecological if you're thinking about it from that particular perspective.
Thanks, Thelma.
You're welcome.
Okay, I've got a couple of longer questions. This is also a great one. The statement organic is regenerative is probably a controversial one to many self-described regenerative farmers who claim that their regenerative practices are superior to just organic. Is your premise mainly that regenerative doesn't really have an agreed upon definition, and that because of the no-till practices of regenerative, that just organic could actually be better due to the data?
I'm happy to take a first response, but Thelma, you should please chime in. It's a really great question. Yes, we believe that organic practices overall are already embodying most of the practices that are intended. And I think Thelma had a really nice slide on, like, what do most people mean when they say regenerative? And that portfolio of practices are already built into the organic standards. Yes, there are ranges of organic, and it's possible for organic to be a bottom bar and continue to advance soil health and other practices beyond just certified organic. So for sure, there is a continuum of how many of these biodiversity and climate benefits you can get out of a given system. And I will say bluntly that it is my belief that a conventional system that's doing soil improving practices like reduced or no-till, but still adding in synthetic herbicides as a poison to kill plants, so that they don't have to till. In my belief, that's not a truly regenerative system. So you can still be moving in that direction, reducing chemical inputs, and sort of still all going in the same direction. So I think they're very aligned. But if you're just substituting one practice for another, you're not fully getting to a regenerative system. But I think if you have organic as that base, you can keep going from there and continue really advancing these benefits.
Yeah, I'll add to that, that I feel like it depends on which particular farmer might take offense to it. As I mentioned, we've seen many organic and regenerative, those who have rock certification or others, say that they are grateful for a toolkit of this nature. And there perhaps are people who don't have the organic certification that are claiming to be regenerative that perhaps feel like their practices are better. That said, we do see organic as a foundation and a baseline for improving. And there are organic systems, as Brise was mentioned, like there is a spectrum. And the goal is for organic to be, for all of these growers to be fully embodying these practices. And there's always room for improvement and growth. But the main and the core values and the definitions and those standards are embedded within there to be those regenerative practices.
I can just chime in with one additional thought on this. We're sort of talking about our organizational approach to supporting improvement and adoption of organic through our research, education, and advocacy. And I think it does relate to the question at hand, because there's always opportunities to continuously improve agricultural systems for these environmental benefits, which are so critical. And I think climate change, more than anything else, feels very present for all of us. And it is why we really strongly believe that continuing to invest in research to help farmers overcome those challenges, whether it be weed management or others, grower education to make sure those research results are getting off the shelves of academia and into the hands of growers so they can implement those practices the best they can be, and that advocacy, which is creating level footholds so farmers have equal access to the resources that our federal agencies might provide, is handholding and technical assistance to growers in doing whatever they're doing. So there are some really, I think, clear ways we can continue helping advance the regenerative aspects of organic farming systems.
Thank you both. Speaking of climate change, can you explain the specific practices within organic farming that support carbon sequestration and mitigate climate change impacts? I know we touched on that a little bit.
Yeah, so it's really important for organic growers to maintain soil cover. And that is why cover cropping is really critical when it comes to sequestering carbon, and also that reduced tillage, right? That non-inversion reduced tillage. When you're tilling soil, or you're not tilling, if you're tilling at depths of 12 inches, that is very harmful to soil organic carbon. And when you're not tilling, it's also harmful because it creates a hard pan and a level of impenetrability that then those microorganisms are also not processing the way they probably could and storing carbon to that level. But when you start implementing practices where you're going to cover crop and you're also going to use, on-farm compost that is being developed, or you're integrating livestock into your cropping systems, all of these practices collectively are rebuilding that soil health and the resilience. So not just to mitigate climate change, but also to adapt to climate change. Nicole, I did also see a question from Kathy in the chat. And the question was, are organic farmers aware of the different impacts mentioned between shallow versus deeper tillage? And does one need different equipment to till shallowly versus more deeply? A moldboard plow is going to be much deeper, but a lot of growers can actually modify their existing equipment to till more shallowly. And I think many organic growers that we work with, that we've heard from, they do know, they are very well aware of the differences between shallow and deeper tillage. But I actually, it triggered something for me because we're up for our next National Organic Research Agenda survey. And I think it would be good to make sure that we include questions that differentiate so that we can get a clearer picture on those practices. So thank you, Kathy.
Thanks for catching that one, Thelma. This is a good one. How does the organic certification differ from some of the new certifications out there, and why is it better? So some of the new certifications being regenerative organic certified, a greener world regenerative cert, animal welfare approved, non-GMO verification, biodynamic certification, and so on.
It's interesting, this proliferation of certifications. It's not new, but we're seeing more and more of them. I would say that a couple things that I think are really strong and powerful about organic certification. One is that it's multi-pronged, so it encompasses many things within that certification. So certifications that are dealing with single attribute can be really confusing to the consumer because things may be either a trade-off or you're having to find a certification with like a whole bunch of certifications on one. And organic certification encompasses many of these practices. Certainly there's a couple of really good ones out there that are organic plus, that include that USDA certified organic as the baseline, and then add some additional characteristics, which we think are, really positive for those looking for that beyond organic choice. But what I think is really powerful about the organic label is that it really originated from the farmers who are innovative in these practices, who are doing organic farming since before that was a label and a definition. And farmers were really verifying each other. They knew consumers were more and more interested in buying food that came from farms managed in these ways, without GMOs, without the chemical herbicides and pesticides, and were produced in harmony with nature. And so it's one of the few industries you really can see where it was the farmers themselves with their partners, their nonprofit allies and customers who went to the federal government and said, hey, can you please regulate us? We want consumer confidence in what it is that we're doing. We're doing a whole bunch of things, and we want to have that transparency and verification. So, when the organic farming community came to Congress and passed the Organic Food Production Act in 1999, and then had years and years and years of public input and helping the Department of Agriculture and Congress define those standards, define the regulation, and actually implement an agency at the Department of Agriculture. So I think, to me, all of this has created a system where we have clear standards. They're uniformly applied, they're transparent, they're enforceable, they're verifiable, and there's a mechanism for ongoing improvement, which we think is also important, because nothing is ever perfect as it is. There's always ways we are learning to keep refining those standards. And I think the organic community has been very hyper participatory. The organic community has lots of ideas on how to keep making it better, but they're speaking up, they're engaging with the National Organic Standards Board, who advises the USDA on standards. And so it is an evolution that keeps getting, more or less stronger and more rigorous over time. And that's incredibly powerful.
Thanks so much, Brise. This question really relates to what we were just talking about. How much should organic or transitioning farmers concern themselves in the next few years with all of these new certifications on the market, particularly as it relates to market opportunities?
Well, I'm happy to start. I think it's a great question, and one none of us completely has the, magic ball to know. Certainly the world consumer preference and understanding has changed, but I think overall there's been a lot of great data that consumers do understand organic, or maybe not perfectly, but at least have the general concepts and are choosing it as a trustworthy source and a place to put their food dollars and support their family. I guess I would say that in my perception, there's still a lot of opportunity overall for consumers and households to better understand organic and any of these terms. I think learning where food comes from is still a little bit of a mystery, especially for those who aren't growing up on kind of farming communities and households. So we as a community, I think, have a shared obligation to continue educating about what these are. But at this point, I think there's a lot of consumer confusion when there's a whole bunch of labels proliferating. And it's not clear that they're really helping consumers navigate those choices. So I do see that organic is still one of the most trusted labels, and will likely continue to be a leading tool for consumers to make informed food choices.
Thanks, Brise. Also related, how do you feel like these new certifications are impacting farmers? Do you believe that they are benefiting them or hindering them?
I'm happy to jump in, but go ahead if you
No,
want to first, Thelma.
yeah, I just feel like when you have so many certifications, it becomes very overwhelming for consumers. And the more overwhelmed consumers are, the less that benefits farmers across the board. And so also consumers don't often know whether something is enforceable or not enforceable in terms of a new label or a new certification. And so by default, in the studies that I've read and some of the work that I've done even in my doctoral degree, that is a very fatiguing process to have too many certifications. It's good to build upon the certifications that we already have, right? So if we are certified organic and then there's a non-GMO, a consumer might say, oh, well, this is non-GMO. It's the same as organic. And that's not the case, very much not the case. And so they can be very confusing. And I think that confusion hinders growth for certified organic farmers.
Yeah. And, I'll go back to the point we said earlier, which is just to be clear, I think our organization, to the extent there are other labels and our certifications, are generally supportive of the ones that use organic as the baseline and have a plus of, so regenerative organic, real organic. We support ways that growers who are doing additional things beyond organic can communicate to their customers about that. I think that terms, label certifications that are not associated with USDA or USDA organic, I think create more risk for confusion. So are ones that I would say overall, I would feel more concerned about. But, I think Thelma's right that each certification is also paperwork for the farmer, rigor, often cost. So there has to be something really meaningful to make it worth it for farmers to be seeking multiple certifications.
Sure. All right, I'm just going to keep going rapid fire.
Great.
We have somebody curious about suggesting a couple of scientific studies that look at the health effects of chemicals on farmers who are farming conventionally. You don't have to send them out right now, but we could always send them later, or anything comes to mind, we can put it in the chat.
Yeah, if they would like to email me, I can send some, or I can try to follow up with you, Nicole, and send some. We do have partners at Friends of the Earth, Kendra Klein, who really focuses on pesticide studies and impacts to both soil, invertebrates, and then also human health. And so I think that's a big passion of hers, and I can pull some of those.
That would be great. And we'll just, for everybody watching, we'll send those out in a follow-up email. Okay. We have somebody saying, what a wonderful webcast. So much great information and perspective. Thank you all. I noticed General Mills is a funder partner of OFRF. They're not really a brand that comes to mind for me when considering organic brands, but is their partnership with OFRF a signal that they are genuinely trying to improve their practices? Is OFRF taking a consultative approach with them as part of this partnership?
That's a great question. Do you want to start, Brise, or?
Sure, I'm happy to start. Yeah, as public charity, we do all of our financial resources, all of our work is supported by partners. Most of our funds come from government grants, individual donors, private family foundations, corporate sponsors of our work. So, we generally believe that to the extent that corporate partners, whether General Mills or others, are supporting us because they believe our work is supporting bigger goals that they are philosophically aligned with. We don't work in a consultative role to any of our donors. They're really making contributions to support OFRF's research, education, and advocacy work. And many brands, as I'm sure most of you are very familiar with, certainly some of the larger CPG brands often have both organic and conventional, or in the case of General Mills, organic, regenerative, and conventional products. So we do believe that organic is really a bright spot for many partners. And so it's exciting to see partners who are doing both organic as well as non-organic products, seeing organic as a future opportunity, investing in an organization that works to advance it.
Yeah, so I'll add to that. And it's just because it came up in another conversation recently. There are people at General Mills who are really committed to growing organic, and 1 in 10 General Mills products have some part of organic certification embedded with them. So those are, Cascadian Farm, Muir Glen, Annie's Organics. But they also sponsor, so General Mills also helps fund the work of Rudale, Marble Seed, and many other organizations, Xerxes Society. And I think that shows that they are committed to trying to advance organic agriculture as much as they can, as much as feasibly possible within their confines.
Thank you. A couple of last questions before we wrap up. If consumers understand the term organic, then why are less than 1% of farmland farmed organically?
Consumer demand does outpace domestic supply. So U.S. is overall an importer of organic products. That's a great opportunity. We believe that organic farming is a benefit to any part of the world. It's happening. So we do support that, but we also see sort of a lost opportunity for domestic production. It's really challenging for supply demand to keep up while keeping prices strong and keeping, a viable farming practice for farmers. It's just a real challenge. I think, look out at the landscape and say, there's a lot more consumer education that needs to happen, right? A lot of consumers are not yet looking for any of these labels, including organic. So I think there's an incredible opportunity for consumers who are interested in learning to educate. And we hope that this organic toolkit can serve as one of the resources to that, but obviously all those partners and brands who work with consumers, I think have a responsibility to keep educating. I think there's also a huge need for more data collection by the Department of Agriculture, including price reporting, so farmers can be getting more lifetime updates on sales data and informing their planting decisions by those. You see USDA's Market News, I think, has long done a really great job of farm gate prices, but a little less great of a job at getting those farm gate prices for organic products. Certainly over recent years, they're doing better. So I want to applaud those good efforts, but I think farmers still need more information to make informed decisions, to be able to update their planting. And I guess the last thing on that I would say is one area that's been a real challenge in farmers leaning into organic transition more is especially crops that rely on long-term rotations. They might only have some of those crops that really have set consumer base. And some years they're having to plant a rotation of something that they don't yet know where to sell it to.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think the conventional producers are relying on as complicated of rotations because of their nutrient, fertilizer, and other inputs that they're able to use in those operations. So there's a few complexities to that question.
I would agree. I would say that I think there's also the issue of just making sure that people have access to land. And I think a lot of the people who are really interested in farming organically and these younger generations of farmers, they may not own the land that they're working on. And organic is an investment. And so for people to make that level of an investment, they also want to make sure that they're going to have a long-term return on that investment as well.
For sure. All right, my last question for you. Is organic farming enough to help in the serious adaptation that climate change will inevitably call for?
I don't think one of anything is ever enough. I think organic farming is a great foundation, but the reality is that our climate change issues are not just related to agriculture, and they're not just related to soil. There's a lot of different influencing factors within there. And so the more, just like within organic systems, the more we stack these things, the better, right? It's not just reducing tillage. It's not just cover cropping. It's not just organic. It's continuing to do as many of these collectively as possible.
Really good point.
Thank you. I would just add, I think we're all aware that there's never a silver bullet for all problems. We know deforestation, we know high consumerism, industry can all be contributors to some of these climate change. But I think within the field of agriculture, there is huge potential with organic systems, but we really have to scale them up. We have to expand them. We have to get beyond 1%. We need to really radically change the landscape. And I believe you all are just incredible partners in that work of helping move more land and more opportunity in organic. We'll keep doing our part by investing in research to make organic more feasible, more doable, help get past those agronomic challenges to transitioning into organic. So I guess my call to action would be, It's not going to fix everything perfectly, but there's a lot of opportunity. And I think we need to keep partnering and collaborating among our community to keep advancing the part that agriculture can do to contribute to climate solutions.
Agreed. All right, well, that was the end of our Q&A session. Thanks everybody who asked questions, beautiful, thoughtful questions. We really appreciate it. And Brise and Thelma, thank you so much for your time today. Your expertise is so valued, and we are so grateful to have partnered with you on this webinar. And thank you to everyone. Oh, go ahead.
Thanks for inviting us. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks to everybody who attended today's webinar as well. We really appreciate your continued support of our organic farmers and ranchers as we grow our impact and transform agriculture. We currently have a pipeline greater than $40 million with many farmers eager to make the transition to organic farming. So if you're interested in making a new investment or adding to your existing investment, please don't hesitate to reach out to one of us on the investor relations team. I'm going to drop the link to the Iroquois Valley Investor Survey again. We really greatly value your insights. And as for the webinar, the recording will be available on our website by next week. We'll also send out a follow-up email with Thelma's suggestions on readings, as well as their presentation deck and the link to the webinar. If you have any questions that we didn't answer, please email us and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And again, thank you so much for joining us, and hope everybody has a great rest of the day. Bye.